sure do like to share your opinions, talking big like somebody's listening. Nobody's listening. It's so fun and games until it doesn't. Toss me out, I'll hit the ignition. Now you listen. Hop up in the window. Smaller and smaller you fade out. Hop up in the window. Yeah.
Did you know that the Susquehannocks were not actually Native Americans, but a prehistoric subspecies of giant humans? In this video, we explore the fascinating history of the Susquehannocks, and despite their mysterious origins, there is proof of them having lived in Pennsylvania for over 16,000 years. Hi, I'm Jenna Bosiger, and this time I uncover some shocking truths about the history of the Susquehannocks in mound builder culture of Pennsylvania. But first, make sure you hit the like and make sure you're subscribed for more about the giant mound builders of North America. So these mound builders were the original inhabitants in the Pennsylvania Susquehanna River Valley. And the Susquehannocks were known for their impressive height, muscular bodies, and large heads in comparison with us. And calling them giants can be very problematic because that's an opinion adjective. It also implies that they were just a really tall race of humans. They were more like the Neanderthals and Denisovans of their time. So the Susquehannocks were not related to any of the Native American tribes. They were different. They were an archaic species of man. They were taller, stronger, and bigger. I think the Iroquois and the Algonquin were the first Native American humans to inhabit North America, but they weren't the first people. So there's only one reference that the Susquehannocks were related to the Iroquois, and that chief source is the Vocabula Macuasica, compiled by the Swedish missionary Johannes Campanus during the 1640s. But in the preface of the book, it reads, and I quote, "The term Susquehannock does not appear in our source, but scholars have come to the conclusion that the language described here may safely be ascribed to the Susquehannocks, who were of Iroquoian descent." And it says the Susquehannock tribe and language are now extinct, and this vocabulary is the only example of their language. Can you believe that? So, the biological relationship between the Susquehannock and the Iroquois isn't even coming from the author. It's coming from some unknown, random, quote-unquote, scholars. And there is not a single state university that would allow you to write a research paper and put some scholars as your reference, as any kind of credible source of reference. Who? We're just supposed to trust some scholars. No. Especially when I don't agree with it. This is not an accident. There is a reason for trying to blend them in with the Iroquois and not acknowledge them as a separate species of humans. All the written records of the history of the Iroquois was written about them, not by them, because scholars do not consider word of mouth of the Native Americans about their own history to be a credible source. And in the 1830s, during the Indian Removal Act, they did blend all these tribes together under one big one. Andrew Jackson, John Wesley Powell used this to monopolize the written history of North America. And the Smithsonian, as a government institution, their first objective is to make our country look good and present science and history in a way that's going to make us look good. And the true history of the Susquehannocks does not. Their actual justification for taking the land from the Native Americans and from the Susquehannocks is this idea of a single line of evolution progressing to them. And so that means every species of human, every race of human is beneath and below them. And they already know everything that any of these other people below them. Up until the 1600s, with the help of the Europeans, were the warrior Iroquois tribe able to penetrate into Pennsylvania. So they were not the same. They were very different. They were conquered by the Iroquois. They were not related to them. And they definitely did not descend from them. They were the first. Not the first humans, but the first people to inhabit North America, the Mound Builders, the Giants. And it says that by the late 1600s and early 1700s, Native Americans were moving into the state of Pennsylvania because they conquered the Susquehannocks. They were finally able to do that with the help of the Europeans. When William Penn and the Quakers, these fundamental Christians, first came to Pennsylvania, there were Pennsylvania gangs that were going out on raids looking for Susquehannocks. They claimed to be motivated by God and were using the Bible as their calling card by comparing the Susquehannocks to the Canaanites. As I can recall the story of the Canaanites in the biblical account, is that God did not consider these Canaanites to be human, and he did not want them to corrupt the human gene pool or procreate. So he ordered humans to raid them and remove them from their native land, also for being evil. And he ordered all the animals and children be eliminated as well. And people have been fighting over that land ever since. Which makes me wonder, was this just another cover story for a land grab? Now, the Canaanites were the ones who were also rumored to be dog-headed men with canine heads, the cynocephalus. They were the ancient rulers of the land of Canaan, and they were around 7 feet tall. And so I can understand the comparison with the Susquehannocks and the Canaanites, because they were both 7 foot tall, ancient native subspecies of humans that were eliminated for being different and to take their land. From unchartedlancaster.com, in an article, Were the Susquehannock Indians Really Giants?, it says, when Captain John first met the Susquehannock Indians on his 1608 voyage up the Chesapeake Bay, he described them as giants. I think what made them seem like giants wasn't just their height, but their overall stature and the physical differences between them and us. They were incredibly muscular. They were taller, bigger, and stronger, and their heads were bigger. But using the term giants to describe them is problematic because they weren't a race of tall humans like us. They were a different, unknown species of archaic, prehistoric, giant, Ice Age people. And like the Neanderthals and the Denisovans of their time, They were different than humans, even though they could have mated. But it was very unlikely under these circumstances. From digitalcommons.wcupa.edu, in 1608, John Smith described the Susquehannocks as giant-like people. And the accuracy of his observation of impressive stature has now been confirmed in a project to review various archaeological materials curated at the Tioga Point Museum in Athens. In the preliminary study of the human skeletal remains from the Murray Garden site, this burial location has been found within the residential area of Athens, Pennsylvania in 1882, and this area was occupied by the Susquehannocks. Tioga is located exactly at the confluence of the Susquehanna and the Chemung river valleys. Those are usually very sacred locations to ancient people, and it was here as well. When this locale became urbanized in the 1850s, this unique topographical feature became covered with a large ditch that passed through a modern garden and orchard plot behind the Murray residence. And in the garden locale, the workmen accidentally uncovered a cluster of Native American graves and associated artifacts. Spanish Hill, right up just a little north of Tioga Point. And the area in the hill's vicinity was previously occupied by the Susquehannocks, and it was a common site for both amateur and professional archaeologists as well as relic hunters. So Spanish Hill was looted, and its finds locally sold to collectors, and the area was repeatedly scoured by relic collectors since the early 1800s. And it was threatened with demolition to be used for highway fill, but in a rare case, lobbying by a local amateur archaeologist preserved the hill. A large Indian mound near the town of Gasterville, Pennsylvania, has been opened and examined by a committee of scientists sent out from the Smithsonian Institute. At some depth from the surface, a kind of vault was found in which was discovered the skeleton of a giant measuring 7 feet and 2 inches. His hair was coarse jet black and hung to his waist, the brow being ornamented with a copper crown, and the skeleton was remarkably well preserved. And yet this is just another of many documented cases of the Smithsonian removing the evidence from the historical record. Indian God Rock has been severely vandalized, so much so its ancient petroglyphs have almost been entirely covered with graffiti, symbolic, representative of what's being done on a larger scale with the cover-up and erasing of the Susquehannocks' history in the United States. And even though we know that the Susquehannock lived in Pennsylvania longer than 16,000 years into the Ice Age, at places like Rainbow Rock, the petroglyph of a mammoth has been neglected by mainstream scholars. Same with the Lenape stone, also with the carving of a mammoth. 2 very tall skeletons. The following was copied verbatim from a note made in his pocket almanac by the late Judge Altley. In 1798, in company with Mr. McAllister and several other respectable inhabitants, we went to the Mr. Neese's tan yard, where we were shown a place near the curing house from whence, in digging a sink tan vat some years ago, were taken 2 skeletons of human bodies. They lay close beside each other and measured about 11 feet and 3 inches in length. The bodies were entire, but being taken up and exposed to the air, they presently crumbled and fell to pieces. From August 1880. Unearthed skeleton of giant, bones of a supposed mound builder, those men 8 or 9 feet high. Curator of the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh and his assistant a few days ago opened up a mound of the ancient race that inhabited this section and secured the skeleton of a man who, when in the flesh, was between 8 and 9 feet high. This mound, which was originally 100 feet long and more than 12 feet high, had been somewhat worn down by time. It is on the J.R. Sechrest farm in South Huntington Township. This farm has been the Sechrest name for more than a century. The most interesting feature of the recent excavation was the mummified torso of the human body, which experts figured was laid to rest at least 400 years ago. Portions of the bones dug up and the bones in legs declares are those of a person between 8 and 9 feet high. Giant bones in Mound. Scientists unearthed relics of Indians who lived 700 years ago. Binghamton. Pennsylvania state historian who have been conducting researches along the valley of the Susquehanna have uncovered an Indian mound at Tioga Point on the upper portion of the Queen Esther's Flat on what is known as the Murray Farm, a short distance from Sayre, Pennsylvania, which promises rich additions to Indian lore. In the mound uncovered were found the bones of 68 men, which are believed to have been buried 700 years ago. The average of these men was 7 feet, with many of them much taller. Evidence of their gigantic size was found in large celts in axes hewed from stone and buried in the grave. On some of the skulls, 2 inches above the perfectly formed forehead, were protrudences of bone. Members of the expedition say that it is the first discovery of its kind on record and an invaluable contribution to the history of the early races. The skull and a few bones found in one grave were sent to the American Indian Museum. Beaver Falls. Workmen, while digging a ditch from the new shovel works to the river at Alquipa today, unearthed the remains of 2 skeletons. They are gigantic size and supposed to be the remains of 2 Indians. They have been in the ground for many years, as the larger bones of the skull only remain. Skeletons of giant found. Petrified bones of man and woman discovered in Pennsylvania quarry. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 2 petrified skeletons, one of a man of giant stature and the other of a woman somewhat smaller, were found in a cavern blasted out of solid blue rock in a hillside by quarrymen. A crevice into a cavern about 6 feet high and 15 square feet. Geologists say evidently belonged to a prehistoric age. The Oil City, Pennsylvania Times of Friday is responsible for the following. On Tuesday, while making an excavation near half a mile north of West Hickory, they exhumed an enormous helmet of iron which was corroded with rust. Further digging brought a sword 9 feet in length, and then they discovered some bones of 2 enormous feet. The teeth are all in place, and all of them are double and of extraordinary size.
The grave of a giant. Visitors go up on Pisgah almost every day. They claim to know of an Indian grave on the top that they would open. The only Indian grave we ever knew of there, says the Troy Gazette, was the one on the south point of the mountain on the farm of Chas Hooker. A very large thigh bone of a human being was dug up 45 years ago at that point near a spring. It was of immense size, and on its being shown to Dr. Theodore Wilder, he said it must have belonged to a man 7 feet high. There were giants in those days. 1897. Erie County Giants. Skeletons of men 10 feet high found in cave. Why, this man was 10 or 12 feet high. Thunder and lightning, exclaimed Farmer Porter in astonishment. The first speaker, who has won local distinction as a scientist, reiterated his assertion. Porter has a farm near Northeast, not many miles from where the Lakeshore Railroad crosses the New York State boundary line. Early this week, some workmen in Mr. Porter's employ came upon the entrance to a cave and on entering found heaps of human bones within. Many skeletons were complete, and specimens of the find were brought out and exhibited to the naturalists and archaeologists of the neighborhood. They informed the wondering bystanders that the remains were unmistakably those of giants. The entire village of Northeast was aroused by the discovery, and today hundreds of people from this city took advantage of their holiday to visit the scene. It was at first conjectured that these remains were those of soldiers killed in battle with Indians that abounded in the vicinity during the last century, but the size of the skull and length of the leg bones dispelled that theory. So far, about 150 giant skeletons of powerful proportions have been exhumed, and indications point to a second cave eastward, which may have probably contained as many more. Scientists who have exhumed skeletons and made careful measurements of the bones say that they are the remains of a race of gigantic creatures compared with which our tallest men would appear as pygmies. There are no arrowheads, stone hatchets, or other implements of war with the bones. Some of the bones are on exhibit at various stores. One is as thick as a good-sized bucket. Pennsylvania, 1859. A megalithic burial vault containing a prehistoric giant skeleton 8 feet in height was discovered on a farm, several hundred similar graves located within the vicinity. This one is too blurry to read anymore. This is from a book titled Aboriginal Sites in and Near Tioga. They're special types of pottery, by no means weak in decoration, as is noted elsewhere. But for long years we have wondered if the large skeletons from our own garden and the unwielding implements found there and on some neighboring sites did not indicate the same race as that described by Captain John Smith in relating his encounters with the mighty Susquehannock in 1608. A careful study of old maps of the writings of Champlain Parkman and some Jesuit relations and the surveys of General Clark encouraged us in this belief. Unquestionably, Captain Smith's Indians were one of the Andaste, the least known inhabitants of the valley of the Susquehanna, and the last, because the most powerful tribe to resist the onslaughts of the famous Iroquois. We believe these people made their last stand within the confines of Bradford County and along the state line. Their villages extended from Spanish Hill, Wyelsing, and possibly a little farther south, and it is recorded that the last battle was in Wyelsing. In somewhat recent years, our theories have been substantiated. The burial sites at Athens on our own property have furnished the best known artifacts for the study of the culture of the Andaste, and it's talking about how the museums include skeletal remains, often indicating men 6 feet or more in height, and pottery with certain distinctive characteristics. The size of many skeletons found hereabouts has been a matter of wonder for the last 30 years, while no competent specialist has checked up on them. The unusual size has led us to have a physician who has made special study of the anatomy examine the skulls from the site, and measuring them, he said they must have been 7 feet tall. Men had horns then. Archaeologists find skulls of prehistoric giants near Athens, Pennsylvania. The archaeologists who are traversing the Susquehanna River Valley, visiting the sites of Indian villages, and digging up aborigines and other relics, are said to have made a most astounding discovery on the Murray Farm near here in finding the bones of 68 prehistoric men. The average height of these men was 7 feet tall, while some were much taller. In addition to the evidence of them being of gigantic size is found in the massive stone battle axes in their graves. The average age of these men is said to have been about 30 or 40. Another amazing point of this discovery is the allegation that perfectly formed skulls were found from which horns grew straight from out of the head. They had unearthed a well-preserved skeleton of an enormous giant belonging to a species of the human family, which probably inhabited this and other parts of the world at the time of which the Bible speaks when it says, "And there were giants in those days." The helmet is said to be the shape of those found among the ruins of Nineveh. The bones of the skeleton are remarkably white. All the teeth are all in their place, and some of them are double and of extraordinary size. These relics have been visited by large numbers of people daily. These remains were found about 12 feet below the surface of a mound, which had been thrown up probably centuries ago, and which was not more than 3 feet above the level of the ground around it. Pennsylvania, Allegheny County. Large skeleton removed from McKee Rock in the Allegheny County. And this is all blurred out. But McKee Rock is a very interesting place located near Pittsburgh. There was a mound at McKee's, an ancient mound, and McKee's Rocks. And in that mound, they found the bones of giants and all kinds of artifacts. Here is a note. You can see this is from the Tioga Museum back to the farm owners at the Murray Farm, talking about the results after having the skeletons tested. And it was confirmed that they were skulls with horns on it. This is about the prehistoric giant bones that were found in Washington County mounds that give up secret race that vanished 10,000 years ago, and 49 skeletons are dug up by archaeologists. I found this written a long time ago about the mound builders, and it says, "Whence came this people called mound builders, found here upon the arrival of the white man? The noted authority upon ancient America accepts as the best of many theories the one advanced called the Atlantis theory. This hypothesis is thus stated: the Atlantis theory of the old American civilization is that it was organized on this continent, but on a portion of the continent which is now below the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. It supposes the continent extended anciently from New Granada, Central America, and Mexico in a long, irregular peninsula, so far across the Atlantic Ocean to the Canary Islands, and then beyond them towards Africa and Europe." So if you look at the timeline of some of these ancient cultures in North America, like the Meadowcroft in Pennsylvania, was over 16,000 years old. Egyptian pyramid, and the Egyptians were building their pyramids 5,000 years ago. It is very likely that the mound builders were the ancestors to the Egyptian pyramid builders.
Be sure to subscribe for more fascinating stories from the ancient past. My name's Jenna Bosiger, and until next time,